Welcome back, guys. My name is Bruno, aka Sucra. I have to slip that disclaimer in there now because after the last video I was yelled for saying that my name was Sucra. But anyways, this is not about me, this is about running Quake on a 486. So fueled by a Volgon's forum thread and by this video from CPU Galaxy, I recruited my friend Will from the channel RetroTechBytes to see what we can achieve running the Quake Time Demo on a 486. The base system that's going to be used is the Rust Bucket, a 486 DX4 100MHz with 16 megs of EDO RAM. If you want to see it in detail, there is a video about it that you can check out by clicking on the card above. With it, I'm testing a few different video cards and memory configurations to see how far we can get on Quake 1 in terms of playability with this system. So the memory configurations are already pretty tight with 212 cache timings and wait states set to 0, and here is a base test run so we can see where we stand before we do anything else. So 10.6 FPS is not too shabby for a 486, but far from playable. There are only a few things that can be done. We can try an overclock on the CPU, different memory modules, different video cards. So let's start with the low-hanging fruit. I'll start testing different video cards and see which one is the faster one before we go to the next stage. The original video card is the Trident TGUI 9440 released in the year 1994. Trident cards aren't really known for their performance, but they're not particularly bad in DOS gaming. We can do something simple and fill in the empty memory modules to reach the full 2 MB from the original 1 MB of video memory and see if that makes any difference. And after running the time demo again, no, the extra mag made no difference. There's also a newer Trident card that we can use, the TGUI 9680 from 1995. It already has the memory modules filled to its maximum capacity of 4 MB of video memory. And I also have this S3 3064 card that should be the fastest out of the lot. This card has something very particular, and that is to achieve its maximum performance in DOS, you need to install a driver. It's from the year 1995 and has 2 MB of memory, also filled up to its maximum capacity, but it has a 64-bit interface with its DRAM modules and a good 2D core. After running the time demo again, we finally see an improvement with a result of 11.1 FPS. Not great, but definitely better. Now that we've figured out what the fastest video card is, let's try to do a bit of an overclock on the 486 DX4 100. First step on the overclock here is to try to run the system at 120 MHz. A 20% bump from 100 MHz should be achievable. For that, we remove one of the jumpers that are used to set the bus frequency, and that will bump it from 33 to 40 MHz. The DX4 naturally multiplies the 33 MHz bus frequency by 3 to get 100 MHz. Yes, it multiplies by 3, not 4. So if we move the bus frequency from 33 to 40 to get 3 times 40, we get 120 MHz. Okay, so there is another way to go about this. You see, CPU Galaxy demonstrated on his video that this motherboard has a fail-safe mechanism that divides the bus frequency so the PCI slot doesn't go over 33 MHz, which is supposed to be its limit. But he also demonstrated a trick to bypass this, and that is to hot swap the jumper with the computer on. This way, the frequency on the PCI slot should remain on 40 MHz, giving our video card also a tiny overclock. This 120 MHz overclock with the 40 MHz bus got us to 13.3 FPS. At this point, I thought I was going to end my participation on the 486 Quake race, but my competitiveness got the best out of me, and I ordered another CPU. The same CPU Galaxy used on his 20.8 FPS record, an AMD X5 133. So this CPU has a bus of 33 MHz, and you guessed it, a multiplier of 4x and not 5 to achieve its 133 MHz on the CPU core. This processor can also be overclocked, of course, and our first attempt will be to do the same and turn the computer on with the jumper and remove it to get the bus frequency to 40 MHz with the 4x multiplier to get 160 MHz on the CPU core. So the system managed to hold that frequency and clock without any hassle. It seems really stable, and running the time demo got us to a crazy 16.4 FPS. That's a huge jump from the original 10.6 FPS, just about 55%. At this point, I'm pretty happy with the result, but there is still something else we can try, and that is to run this baby at 60 MHz with a 3x multiplier, just like CPU Galaxy did. That will get our bus speed to 60 MHz, and with the 3x multiplier we will have a core clock of 180 MHz. Again, if we do the same switch on the fly, it means our PCI ports will hold 60 MHz. Unfortunately, I couldn't get the system to be stable at a 60 MHz bus, and this will land the Rust Bucket's participation on the 486 Quake race with a respectable 16.4 FPS. Keep in mind the Rust Bucket is missing external cache, so that's something we can revisit if we ever find one of those external L2 cache modules. That is very specific to this motherboard, the PC Chips M919. Now let's see what Will from RetroTechBytes has achieved on his own 486 and what parts and techniques he used for that.
Hey Bruno, it's Will from RetroTechBytes, and thanks for having me. My entry into the 486 Quake race is a little bit different than everyone else's has been so far, so let's take a look, shall we?
So my system's actually been taken apart since I built it and did the benchmarking, but this was the start of the show. This is my DX4 that I used. I overclocked it to 120 megahertz and got a score of 14.1 FPS. This DX4 is actually quite new. It was made in not 1997, but 2007, hence the Core 2 Duo era logo. As for video, I went VLB and used this unassuming monster. It's the ARC 1000 in the form of a Paradise Bali 32. It's got a full 2 megabytes of video RAM, and it is probably one of, if not the fastest VLB card in DOS. And yeah, here's the case that it was in. This is a full AT version of the Baby AT case that houses both the Rust Bucket and the world's fastest 386. Great case, and actually the board that's currently in there is the board I use, so let's take a quick look. Granted, I have about 8 million cards in here. That's pretty much the standard state, even when I was testing it before. I have a Gus Max and ESS Audiodrive. I have a network card. Right now this is a ATI Mach, but this is where the Paradise was. I have a SCSI card, and then as well, I also used, and I still use, a Promise EIDE 2300 Plus for just fast I/O stuff. And yeah, the board is an Opti V4P895 green motherboard. It was made by QDI, which is Lenovo, and yep, pretty good board. So once again, just wanted to say thanks again, Bruno, and this was an awesome time, and yeah, looking forward to the next challenge. Game on.
So this was an interesting project that may just live on forever on Twitter. If you want to post your results and let us see it, just do it with the hashtag 486QuakeRace. Anyways, I hope you got some useful information out of this video, or at least had some fun. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel, like the video, and I'll see you next time.